Where the Dead Speak by No Sleep Scribe. Welcome, listeners. How unsettled would you be if you could communicate with the dead as effortlessly as with the living? Tonight's story takes us to Briar Creek, a small town where the dead are never really gone and the living have perfected the art of pretending nothing is wrong. Noah Swain can see the dead, hear them, speak with them. It's a gift he never asked for. One night, a new ghost appears at his bedside. Rachel Green, young, frightened, dead. She doesn't remember who killed her, only that someone wanted her gone. In a town where the living lie to protect themselves and the powerful hide their crimes, Noah will have to listen to the dead if he hopes to stop history from repeating. Because in Briar Creek, the dead don't lie, but the living, they do. So settle in and listen closely to both the living and the dead. This is a work of fiction. Please listen with the lights low and don't bury the truth. If you enjoy psychological horror, atmospheric storytelling, and slow burn dread, you're in the right place. Welcome to Creepy Chronicles for No Sleep Nights. Stay a while. You are welcome here, both the living and the dead. Story written and narrated by No Sleep Scribe. Like what you hear? Subscribe for more original dark fiction. Leave a comment. What part stayed with you? Share with someone who loves unsettling stories. Content note: this story includes depictions of death, murder, violence, and themes of corruption and emotional distress. Listener discretion is advised. Where the Dead Speak by No Sleep Scribe. I woke to the smell of damp leaves and copper. A girl stood at the edge of my bed. Rachel Green, dead and already asking for help. My name is Noah Swain, and I was born into the quiet 15%. Briar Creek has a high concentration of mediums. About 15% can see the dead. Not that we say it out loud. You don't exactly put, "I can see your grandmother standing behind you," on a resume or a dating profile. Most of us learn early to keep our eyes forward and our mouths shut. Rachel was young, barely more than a teenager. Blonde hair matted dark on one side, like she'd slept in rain. Hoodie soaked through, one sneaker missing. She stared down at her hands. "You can see me," she said. Not a question. "Yes," I answered. My voice felt dry. "You're new." Seeing ghosts is one thing. Hearing them is rarer. Speaking back and forth with them, almost unheard of. I can do all three. It's the only thing that makes me special. Helping the dead is the only time I ever feel necessary. Sometimes it seems like they are the only ones who actually see me. Ghosts in Briar Creek usually fade around the edges, like old photographs. But she was sharp, too sharp, still tightly tied to the world. Someone murdered me last night. I can't remember who or how. I wasn't ready to die. I had barely gotten to live. Will you help me? And right then, I already knew I would. Because in Briar Creek, the dead don't lie, but the living do. And some of them will bury the truth right along with you. I swung my legs off the bed slowly. "Do you know where your body is?" She shook her head. "I remember walking. I remember the creek, falling, hands on me. Her brow furrowed. Then I was here. That was bad. When the dead don't know where they are, it usually means someone didn't want them to be found. Do you remember any details? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed. Tears welled, but they didn't fall. Ghosts don't cry the way the living do. No, she whispered. I heard footsteps. I think it was someone I knew. That was worse. Did you see his face when you felt his hands on you? Think hard. She shook her head again, harder this time. Every time I try, it's like static. Her hands fisted in her hair, and her face collapsed into ugly despair. Why can't I remember? This isn't fair, she sobbed brokenly. That happens sometimes. Trauma scrubs detail away, or someone takes them. I gave her a few moments to mourn, then made sure my voice was gentle. Do you have any enemies? Any angry ex-boyfriends? Anyone you can think of who may have wanted to hurt you? Her sobs quieted as she visibly composed herself. No one. I'm engaged to Tim Huffman, my first boyfriend. We're getting married in May. He's already bought our house. He works for Councilman Ward, who treats him like family and pays him well. Tim plans to spend the rest of his life making sure I'm the happiest woman in town. She smiled sweetly, remembering. No enemies, ever. Occasional arguments, of course, but nothing that lingered. She looked thoughtful. As far as I know, no one has any reason to want me dead. But it feels like something is missing, like there is something I should remember, but don't. I met her haunting blue eyes. I will do everything I can to help you remember, help you find out why this happened and who did it. By the time the sun was fully up, Rachel had followed me through coffee, a shower, and my ritual of grounding, touching solid things, naming what was real. She watched everything with the wide, stunned attention of someone who hadn't realized how much living involved until it was gone. The town hadn't reported her missing yet. Rachel lived alone in a converted garage on Miller Street. College kid, worked nights at the diner. No one would worry until she missed a shift or a class, which meant I had time. I pulled on my jacket and headed downstairs. Rachel drifted beside me, occasionally lagging behind, like she was learning how to exist without feet, or that walking with only one shoe was awkward. The dead linger where they mattered. If I wanted answers, I'd have to ask those who'd already stopped pretending. Old Man Calder stood outside the hardware store, just as he had every morning since he died of a heart attack 15 years ago. Most people walk straight through him now without realizing it. "Morning, Noah," he said, tipping his spectral hat. "Morning," I replied. "Did you see or hear anything unusual last night?" Calder squinted, rubbing his chin. "Lots of unusual things, boy. Depends what you're asking." "A girl, Rachel Green, around the creek." The Phillips family was walking towards them on the sidewalk. Upon noticing Noah talking to no one they could see, they averted their gazes and sped up. Those who couldn't at least see ghosts tended to be uncomfortable when they realized some were around. Calder's expression sobered. Ah, yes. She came through here late. Kept looking over her shoulders, seemed nervous, scared maybe. Was anyone following her? He hesitated. Ghosts don't lie, but they can avoid truths. There was a man, Calder said finally. Didn't see his face, but I recognized the weight of him. That's not very helpful. Calder snorted. It is if you know this town. Some folks leave deeper footprints than others. Rachel looked at me. What does that mean? It means, I said quietly, someone who belongs here, who has influence. We crossed Main Street, heading toward the old theater. Inside lingered Mrs. Bell, who died in the 70s and never forgiven the town for closing the place. She hovered near the ticket booth, humming tunelessly. Mrs. Bell, I said, did you notice anything last night? Her eyes lit up. Oh, plenty. A woman screamed for one. Rachel flinched. From where? I asked. Down by the water, she said. But it stopped too suddenly, like someone had put their hand over the sound, or the creek took it away. They say the creek takes what it wants. Did you hear a voice? Mrs. Bell nodded slowly. A man's, soft, familiar, the kind that makes you stop running because you think you're safe. My stomach dropped. Do you know who it was? She laughed softly. I've told you what I can. If you are looking for more answers, look elsewhere. We went to the creek. It was swollen from recent rain, brown water sliding over stones like a body being dragged away. Rachel hovered at the bank, staring. I fell here, she said. I hit my head, but I wasn't dead yet. Did someone push you? She nodded. I felt hands. Then everything went cold. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I saw another figure standing knee-deep in the water. Lena Price drowned herself 8 years ago after her boyfriend skipped town. You're poking things you shouldn't, Noah, she said. I'm looking for a murderer. Lena smiled sadly. Aren't we all? Who did it? She glanced at Rachel, then away. I can't say names. Can you say why? Her gaze returned to the water. Because she knew something. Something small. The kind of thing men in this town kill for. Rachel's eyes widened. I didn't. Yes, you did, Lena said gently. You just didn't know it mattered. I took a slow breath and tasted iron in the air. Then help me remember, Rachel whispered. Lena shook her head. Memory isn't the problem. Permission is. In Briar Creek, the dead follow rules no one remembers writing. Some can't stray far from where they died. Some can't say names. Some can't look at the thing that killed them. Some lose memories surrounding their death. It isn't about will. It's about what the town allows. And Briar Creek allows its secrets. Fine, I said. Then tell me what kind of man he is. Lena considered this, as if weighing the wording against consequences. He's the sort of man who smiles while he's deciding whether you matter. Rachel pressed her trembling fingers to her lips. Someone I trusted. Well, I won't disappear like he wants me to. Together, we'll find him, and I'll make him remember me every day for the rest of his life. I followed the creek upstream until the banks narrowed and the trees leaned in close. Rachel and Lena came with me, like two halves of a shadow. A local superstition said water holds memory better than people do. If that was true, then the creek remembered everything the people in Briar Creek had ever done wrong. The ghost light shifted. The tinkle of pebbles, disturbed by a firmly placed foot, drew my attention across the creek. A ripple spread across the water. Someone else was here. At first, I thought it was another spirit, blurred around the edges, soaked in the thin blue haze of the in-between. But the longer I looked, the clearer he became. He stood on the opposite bank, tall, neat, deliberate. Brown hair combed tidily back, breath fogging in the cold October air. Expensive wool coat, the kind you don't want to get muddy. He noticed me noticing him. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing one that didn't reach his cold shark's eyes. Then he was gone. Rachel grabbed my arm. Did you see him? Did you see? Yes. And unlike most ghosts, he'd looked right at me. I knew that smile before my mind would let me name it. Councilman Elliot Ward. Born and raised in Briar Creek. Father owned half the timberland. Grandfather owned the rest. Elliot had that polished church elder gravity that made people confide in him without even realizing they were doing it. He chaired the zoning board. He spoke at high school graduations. He took casseroles to widows and remembered everyone's kids' names. He was also Tim Huffman's boss. Rachel's breath hitched. But Mr. Ward, he gave me a wedding card. He said we were family. Yeah, that fit. Calder had said he recognized the weight of the man. Some people leave impressions, like footprints through wet clay. Elliot Ward left trenches. Why would he hurt me? Rachel whispered. I didn't answer, not yet. Not until I understood the shape of the rot. We left the creek and walked towards town. As we passed the diner, Mrs. Ruiz's ghost peered out from the pass-through window. Flour dusted across the afterimage of her apron. You shouldn't be sniffing around Ward, she said sharply. He keeps his floors polished for a reason. What reason? I asked. So no one sees the stain. There it was again, truth that couldn't say its own name. I headed for City Hall. Rachel followed close now, like distance itself had become frightening. Inside the council chambers, the air felt colder than it had any right to. Sometimes buildings remember too. The old wood paneling hummed with old promises and newer lies. He was here, not in the flesh yet, but his presence had left fingerprints. I sat in one of the back pews. Rachel hovered in the aisle. Think, I said softly. Forget the face for a moment. Tell me what you heard. She closed her eyes. I heard my name. He said it softly, like you do when you wake someone you love. Then he said, her brow knitted. He said, you shouldn't have looked in the wrong drawer. A chill crept down my spine. What drawer? She opened her eyes. At Tim's place. He'd left for work early. I went looking for a stamp. In his desk, I found an envelope, thick, full of cash, and a list of names, council names. Her voice faltered, and the word Creek written next to some of them. I swallowed. How much cash? Thousands. Of course. Briar Creek's biggest controversy over the last year had been the proposed development project. Luxury cabins and a private retreat on protected land upstream. Most of the town hated it. Publicly, the council had stalled. Privately, payoffs. Environmental impact studies could disappear. Zoning laws could bend. Creek contamination could be ignored, especially when that contamination had already started. Rachel must have understood the implications of that envelope. A little doubt, a seed. Maybe she mentioned it to Tim, and Tim told Ward. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because Elliot Ward made himself sound like the solution to every problem he caused. Rachel, I said quietly, Elliot Ward has money in this project. So do his friends. If word got out, it would ruin them, she finished. And when powerful men feel cornered, Lena murmured from the doorway, they don't fight fair. Rachel backed away as if the truth itself burned. He walked me to the creek, she whispered. I remember that now. I thought, he said he wanted to clear things up. He put his coat around my shoulders, told me not to be afraid. Her voice cracked. I turned to face the creek. Then I felt hands on the small of my back, shoving, hard. Then hands on my shoulders, the back of my neck, holding me down, the cold creek water. No fights, no screams, just a guiding hand that helped gravity do its work. Murder by omission. No bruises, no marks. Just a town that would call it an accident. I hated how plausible it was. And what he's hiding, I said, as much to myself as to her, isn't just the payoff money. It's the poison already leaking into this creek. If you'd gone to the police, if enough people questioned it, his whole life would collapse. Rachel stared at the water through the window like she could see all the way back to last night. So what do we do now? She asked. The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Because Elliot Ward wasn't just a murderer. He was a man the town trusted. And Briar Creek protects its own, dead or alive. A couple hours later, the town was grieving. A couple of traumatized kids found Rachel's body when they went fishing. At the police station, I asked to speak to the detective handling Rachel's case. I told him of my abilities and that Rachel was murdered. Elliot Ward killed her to cover up corruption related to the development project. Detective Harrow looked at me with pity. Mr. Swain, I'm sure that people who claim to have your abilities think that everyone should just automatically take what they say as gospel. However, law enforcement deals with verifiable facts, not gossip from supposed ghosts. He sighed and rolled his shoulders as though he held the weight of the world upon them. We are just beginning the investigation into Mrs. Green's death, but so far every indication points to a tragic accident. If you keep inserting yourself into an active investigation, there may be consequences. Now go home and let us do our jobs. I didn't sleep well that night. Rachel perched in the corner of my living room, hugging her knees like she needed to keep herself from unraveling. The heater rattled in the walls. Outside, the creek whispered like it was trying to confess. Proof, I said. We need proof. Not intuition, not ghost testimony. Something the living couldn't ignore or explain away. Rachel watched me with hollow patience. Tim has the envelope. Then that's where we start. Tim Huffman lived in a small house on Maple Row, one of those places that always smelled faintly like detergent and microwave dinners. His car wasn't in the driveway when I got there the next morning. Rachel stood beside me, wringing the hem of her hoodie. "You're not going to break in, are you?" she asked. I didn't answer. I'd never robbed the living before, but I'd also never had a ghost begging me for justice. The back door was old, lock warped by 1,000 seasons. It yielded with a reluctant sigh. I stepped inside, closing it quietly behind me. The house felt heavier than it should have. Grief does that. It settles in corners, thickens the air. His desk was in the bedroom, dark wood, a sliding drawer with a brass handle worn smooth by worry. My pulse hammered as I pulled it open. Empty. Just a few pens, a takeout menu, a stray paperclip. "He moved it," Rachel whispered. Of course he had. After he told Ward. After Ward told him to be careful. I checked the closet, under the mattress, behind the dresser. Nothing. But I did find something else. A suit jacket. Dark wool. Expensive. The inside pocket was weighted. I reached in and pulled out a phone. Not Tim's. Sleeker. Locked, but with a fingerprint sensor. And a thin smudge on the corner where rain had once kissed the glass. "Elliot Ward," I breathed. "Why would his phone be here?" Rachel asked. "Because Tim was his errand boy, and sometimes the boss forgets to pick up his toys." I slipped it into my jacket and left before my conscience had a chance to argue. Breaking into a councilman's phone was easier than I wanted it to be. A friend of mine, Riley, ran a repair shop and owed me favors. She didn't ask questions when I said I needed the data, just took the phone to the back room and reemerged an hour later with a USB drive and a look like she wished she'd asked those questions. "There's encrypted messaging on here," she said. "Custom app, not standard. But the backups weren't encrypted properly. Rookie mistake." I didn't tell her the rookie in question owned half the town. Back home, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Rachel hovered over my shoulder like a cold draft. It was all there. Messages, photos, reports, financial disclosures, thread after thread of gray text spilled across the screen. I leaned back, heart pounding. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. Then I heard it. A floorboard creaked. Not in my apartment. In the hall. Rachel vanished like blown ash. Someone knocked gently on my door. "Mr. Swain?" A calm, warm voice. The kind that made you want to invite it in for tea. "It's Councilman Ward. May I come in?" My mouth went dry. I slid the USB into my pocket and closed the laptop, heart ticking loud enough I was sure he could hear it. I opened the door a crack. There he stood, flesh and blood this time. Same immaculate coat, same warm, friendly smile that could drown you in goodwill, unless you noticed that it never touched those cold shark's eyes. "Good morning," he said. "Mind if we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Behind him, ghost light flickered. Lena, Mrs. Bell, old man called her. They all watched him with the kind of attention prey gives a wolf. "About what?" I asked. Ward's smile didn't falter. "Oh," he said lightly, "about the sort of misunderstandings that can ruin a man's life." He looked past me into the apartment, and I realized two things at once. He already suspected what I had, and he believed, truly believed, that this town would choose him over the truth. Rachel appeared behind my shoulder, eyes blazing. "Don't trust him," she whispered. "Please." I didn't. I couldn't. I could see the truth mirrored in Rachel as clearly as she saw me. But I stepped aside anyway. Because if I wanted to bury him, I needed to hear exactly how far he was willing to go to keep himself clean. Ward stepped inside like a pastor entering a confessional, quiet, composed, certain the absolution would be his by default. "Thank you," he said, glancing around my small apartment with polite curiosity, as if he were admiring a waiting room he didn't intend to sit in for long. "I like to handle things privately, quietly. Saves everyone a lot of embarrassment." "Some things shouldn't be quiet," I said. His gaze returned to me, steady and patient. As he contemplated me, the silence in the room seemed to throb. Only our whispered breathing disturbed the stillness. He finally broke the silence. "I'm aware you hear stories from people who don't have the luxury of telling them to anyone else. Ghosts." He wouldn't say the word. Men like Ward never named the tools they used unless they were claiming credit. "I want to assure you," he continued, jaw tightening and shark's eyes flattening, "that Tim is distraught, and I am supporting him in his time of need. It would be a shame if speculation led anywhere permanent." His tone never sharpened, not once, but a pressure filled the room, like the air itself was being slowly squeezed. "Where's your phone?" I asked. That made him smile, truly smile, for the first time. "So you have it," he said. I didn't confirm, but his expression said I didn't need to. "I'll make this very simple, Mr. Swain." Ward clasped his hands in front of him. "A private citizen illegally accessed my property and obtained confidential communications. If that information were made public, it would harm innocent parties, spook investors, maybe even destabilize local employment. And considering your sensitivities, well," he took one step closer, "who do you think the town will believe? Me or the man known for talking to empty rooms?" Rachel appeared between us like a cold breath. "Don't listen to him," she hissed. Ward didn't react. He couldn't see her. But he was still dangerous. "Where is it?" he asked softly. I met his gaze. "Gone." His eyes cooled by a single degree. That was unwise. The next part happened too fast for my mind to catch up. He lunged. Not clumsy anger, precise movement. A hand closing around my throat like he'd practiced this in his head 1,000 times. He slammed me back against the wall so hard the picture frame rattled and fell. I don't enjoy this, he murmured, even as his fingers tightened. But I do what must be done. My airway shrank to a pinhole, vision speckled, the world narrowed to his hand. I clawed at his wrist, felt the rigid calm in his muscles. He didn't shake, didn't pant, just restricted, measured. I tried to speak, but the sound came out as a scrape. Rachel screamed. Ghosts don't usually scream the way living people do. Their fear is muffled, swallowed by the world. But this time something broke loose inside her. Her voice ripped through the room like shattered glass. "Help! Someone help him!" She bolted through the wall like a streak of frost, out into the hallway, then through the front door without slowing. I saw her only in flashes, white, frantic, unraveling, before my vision darkened. Ward leaned closer, breath warm against my ear. His fine suit whispered against my jeans and t-shirt. "I'll tell them you attacked me," he whispered. "I tried to restrain you. You fell. Head injuries are unpredictable." Stars burst behind my eyes. My knees gave out, but he held me upright, careful not to leave visible bruises on my neck. Of course he knew how. The world tilted. Rachel ran down Maple Street, shrieking into the cold morning air, waving her translucent arms like a drowning girl. Passerby ignored the chill sliding through them, the sudden goosebumps, the animal sense of wrong, until she saw him. A kid, maybe 18, leaning against the brick wall outside the arcade, cigarette dangling from his lips. Shaggy dark hair, old band hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. Forearm tattoo of a tombstone with "See you around" on it, and a hollowed out look in his eyes that said he'd already seen too much in life to be surprised by death. He dropped the cigarette, his gaze locked with hers. "Damn, remind me not to complain about being bored again." "You can see me," she gasped. He swallowed, nodded once. "Please," she begged. "He's killing him. Apartment over the bakery, 3rd floor. Please." For a heartbeat, he just stared. Then he ran. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, bursting through the unlocked door of my building, breath ragged. Inside my apartment, I could feel the darkness reaching for me greedily, hungrily. My vision was a narrow tunnel through a fuzzy black void, and the tunnel was closing. The sounds of the outside world were fading, muffled, like ghostly hands were covering my ears and pressing harder and harder. At the same time, my heartbeat was amplifying, intensifying, so loud I could feel it pulsating in my limbs. Then Ward's iron grip around my throat loosened, not because of mercy, because the front door slammed open. "What the hell?" the kid shouted. Ward released me and turned smoothly, mask already sliding back into place. "Thank God," he said, instantly contrite. "You're just in time. This man is having a psychiatric episode." The kid didn't buy it, because he could still see Rachel hovering behind me, sobbing. "Get away from him," the kid snapped. Ward's eyes narrowed, calculating, reassessing. Then he smiled again. "I think," he said gently. We should all take a breath. The kid grabbed his phone. No, we're calling the cops. Ward's pleasant expression cracked in the smallest, ugliest way. But he stepped back, hands raised. I'll wait, he said calmly. I have nothing to hide. He lied like he breathed. I collapsed to my knees, coughing, lungs ripping air like they'd been drowning. Rachel knelt beside me, though she didn't have knees anymore. I found him, she whispered. I found someone. You're okay. You're okay. Not yet, but I was breathing. Ward stood by the door, posture perfect, as if posing for a courthouse portrait. And in that moment, despite the terror, despite the bruising pressure still ghosted around my throat, I realized something. He'd overplayed. He'd come to silence me himself. And now there was a witness. One the town couldn't dismiss as the crazy man who talked to empty rooms. Because this time I wasn't the only one who'd heard the dead scream. The paramedics checked my breathing. The police checked Ward's smile. They didn't like what they saw in either. The kid, his name was Jonah, I later learned, kept his phone's camera trained on Ward the entire time. Rachel hovered at his shoulder, making sure he didn't waver, whispering the moments back to him as they happened, so he couldn't doubt himself later. He had him by the throat, Jonah repeated to the officer. I saw it. I heard him. Ward gave a mild, wounded chuckle. I was trying to restrain him. Save it, the officer said. You'll have time to explain at the station. That should have been enough, but I knew better. Ward was practiced, slippery. His lawyer would sand down the edges until the story fit neatly into a sympathetic palm. So, undisputable proof. I kept my mouth shut until we were at the station, until I had paper, electricity, and, most importantly, witnesses. Later, with a voice that still rasped around bruised cartilage, I handed the USB over. This isn't speculation, I told them. It's documentation. They plugged it in. Screens lit up the dimmed conference room like cold moons. Officers leaned forward. A detective in a tired suit began scrolling through the messages, each line another nail. Ward. Deposit complete. Ward. Make sure she knows her place and stays in it. Ward. I may need to talk to her. Reassure her. Ward. Bring her to the creek, quietly, then leave and give us privacy to talk. Screenshots, logs, account registration trails leading straight back to an LLC Ward owned under a different name. Bank records. And then gold, an audio file. He must not have known it existed. A recording app had captured part of their meeting by the creek, likely triggered automatically when his phone registered motion and sound. The quality wavered, but the content was unmistakable. Rachel's voice, thin with cold fear. I don't want trouble, Mr. Ward. Then his, soft and paternal. You won't cause any. You're a good girl. You'll forget what you saw. Silence. The rush of water. A startled cry. A splash. And his final sentence, unguarded, spoken to no one but the dark. You shouldn't have looked. The room went still. Not silent, still. Like the truth itself had frozen the air. The detective paused the file, pressed play again, stopped it. looked slowly up at Ward, who had insisted on being present with his attorney because he still believed he could steer the narrative back to shore. His attorney went visibly pale. "That recording," Ward said calmly, "is taken out of—" "No," the detective said. "It isn't." He clicked another window open. Security footage. Riley, God bless her stubborn soul, had downloaded the shop's cameras when she cracked the phone. The footage clearly showed me, handing the device to her. Legal chain of custody from then on. No tampering. No chance to fabricate. Ward's lawyer tried anyway. "This is circumstantial at best. My client—" The detective switched to the financials, transactions, routing numbers, timestamps lined up neatly with the messages, and then the environmental report, the one showing contamination levels 3 times the legal limit, signed digitally by an inspector on Ward's payroll. Everything braided together into one undeniable rope. Ward's mask didn't crack this time. It shattered. "You don't understand," he said, voice finally stripped of warmth. "This town needs stability, order. These people—" He gestured around, losing the thread of charm entirely. "They don't know what's best for them. I do. I always have. Communities only function when people know their place." There it was, the confession. Not the legal one, perhaps, but the human one. The core rot laid bare in the middle of the station, under fluorescent lights that made every lie look jaundiced. "Mr. Ward," the detective said quietly, "you're under arrest." The sentence dropped into the room like a stone through ice. Ward didn't flinch at the cuffs, not at first. He wore them like an inconvenience, a misunderstanding, as though the officers had accidentally shackled the concept of civic duty itself. But I saw the moment reach him. It wasn't when they read his rights. It was when they bagged his phone, his lifeline, his weapon, and labeled it evidence. With that and Jonah's sworn statement, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Undisputable, interlocking, a net with no gaps to wriggle through. Rachel stood inches from Ward's shoulder, so close her hair brushed the fabric of his suit jacket. Her eyes were no longer wide with shock or grief. They were steady. "You murdered me," she said softly, not screaming now, not begging, just stating a fact. "I'll never get married, never have children, never grow old with Tim. You didn't just kill the person I was. You killed the person I could be, the people my children and grandchildren could have become. You took it all and threw it away. In return, you will live every day knowing that what you did to me destroyed your life, brought your house of cards tumbling down." Tears streamed down her pale cheeks. "It's not enough. Not nearly enough. I wanted justice, and I'm glad it's coming. But justice is empty and cold, like your heart." Ward couldn't hear her, but he shivered reflexively, like someone just walked over his grave. Rachel wasn't the only lingering dead who watched. Old Man Calder leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Mrs. Bell hovered by the ceiling vent like a dark bird. Lena sat on the edge of the table, legs swinging slowly through solid wood. The ghosts of Briar Creek had assembled to witness the moment the town's polish cracked. And this time the truth had teeth. Ward's attorney recovered enough to begin hissing words like inadmissible and chain of custody. But every time he did, the detective calmly walked through the documentation again. Riley's logs, security timestamps, metadata, no holes, no mercy. This isn't how the town treats people who serve it, Ward said finally, ice replacing charm. You need leaders like me. We need clean water, the detective replied. We need people who don't drown college girls because they ask the wrong questions. That one actually made Ward blink. For the first time, I saw something behind his composure. Not fear. Offense. Like we were the ones crossing a line. They led him through the station lobby toward the holding cells. Cameras flashed. Local reporters tipped off fast. His wife stood frozen near the door, hand over her mouth. A police clerk cried. An old man at the front desk whispered a stunned prayer under his breath. The town was watching the man they trusted, admired, even loved, and realizing the devil hadn't worn horns. He'd worn a pressed wool coat and a church smile. Rachel followed him down the hallway. She didn't speak. She just looked at him. Then she turned away, and the tether that bound her to that creek, to that night, to that terrible second of trusting the wrong voice, snapped. She drifted back toward me. I feel lighter, she whispered. Is that normal? Sometimes, I said. My voice still rasped. My throat still hurt. But breathing no longer felt borrowed. Detective Harrow came back into the room and sat across from me. He studied me for a long time, not with pity now, but with something closer to respect. I owe you an apology, he said. You owe Rachel justice, I replied. He nodded. We'll get it. And for once, I believed him. Outside fog rolled in, low and soft, over the town square. The creek whispered its endless confession beneath the bridge. News vans arrived. Windows glowed. A muttering crowd gathered, snapping pictures and recording videos. Phones buzzed. Conversations started that would not stop for a long, long time. Because Briar Creek had finally been forced to look at itself, and it hadn't liked what it stared back. Rachel stood beside me on the station steps. I'm scared, she admitted. What happens now? To me? Sometimes, I said gently, the dead stay until they're ready to go. Sometimes until they're heard. And sometimes, she waited. Sometimes, I finished, the town has to change before they can leave. She looked out across the water where the fog curled like pale fingers. I think, she said softly, I need to know my death mattered, that it forced this town to see itself. The living have ignored the rot for too long. Now maybe they'll change. She sighed and met his gaze. The dead don't bother to hide from the truth. They seek it out. Maybe it's time for the living to do the same. I plan to stick around. I think I'd like to see how this ends. And I realized, so would I, because when the dead finally speak, the living don't get to stay quiet anymore. In the weeks after Ward's arrest, Briar Creek returned to its careful, deliberate quiet, like a pond smoothing over after a stone sinks from sight. People smiled at Noah in the grocery store now, kind and reassuring, the way people smile when they'd prefer not to talk about something. But they didn't meet his eyes. The town paper never mentioned ghosts. It never mentioned the way Rachel's voice had cut through the dark to save Noah. It only said justice had been served, and everyone seemed relieved to let the rest sink back underground, the way the town liked it. Sometimes, late at night, Noah would see them, pale shapes gathered along the creek, whispering to the water, and he understood what Rachel had meant. The dead weren't the ones hiding, the living were. And in Briar Creek, truth was something you didn't bury in the earth. You buried it in silence.